I am honored and delighted to be here. And I was really moved by Archbishop Coakley's homily tonight. I have spent some time, in the brief amount of time it's been available, studying the encyclical Brothers All. And I think it is an important document, particularly at this time in history. And so I think I would hope my theme for tonight is Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God. Now that's an odd theme, arguably, for lawyers, given what we do. And I'd like to begin with a couple of events that have happened in my profession as a law professor. But know that I also actively practice law. In fact, I have currently 3 cases related to abortion that I'm involved in. I'm the director of our Prolife Center at the University of St. Thomas. Yes, I saw some of you going, which side? So I actually practice law as well, but we're limited in how much we should do, and most of it is pro bono work. I do a lot of representation of states defending their pro-life laws, but because of the limited budgets and because I'm blessed to have a salary as a law professor, my standard fee is a chocolate bar with almonds. And my preference is Hershey's. Please don't get me any of that fancy stuff. The big giant bar is good though. But let me tell you a little bit about my experience in legal education, because I think it's really formative of where we find ourselves in today's political environment. And I promise to avoid a little bit politics and involve myself in it only insofar as the encyclical addresses it. So let me begin with a story from when I was visiting at the University of Washington in St. Louis, a very fine law school. I was doing a summer course for them there in professional responsibility. And the Archbishop noted that our most important vocation is to become a saint. It is to find our way home to God. And many people question whether lawyers really whether that's an impediment or whether it can actually be a road to salvation. And some people have observed that many of the lawyers who are canonized, and there are several, usually quit practice before they. So that's a problem and a struggle for our law students. And I was teaching legal ethics at the time, and we were talking about the morality of cross-examining a witness for the other side with the deliberate intent to make what you know to be truthful testimony appear confused or untruthful or inaccurate. And is that something we're obligated to do? So the witness to a car accident, who you know is accurately recounting the event, but you also know wears glasses, and so you raise the issue of, well, how well could you see? Could you really see that distance? Those sorts of things. The stuff of which lawyer movies are replete with. And one of my students at the time looked at me and she said, I don't know why we're doing this. You know, lawyers help people do immoral things and do immoral things for their clients all the time. I mean, that's sort of what the job of a lawyer is. I am not one to suffer fools lightly, I fear. It is one of my vices. So my immediate reaction to her, without even thinking, was, you need to get up and run from this law school. Do not come back, do not look back, because why would you waste your life, the only life you have, helping people do immoral things? If that's really what you think we do, you need to stop law school today and go find someplace else. And she was shocked, and that's not the sort of thing professors typically say to students publicly in the classroom. I am a little bit of the Kingsfieldian. Those of you who've ever seen Paper Chase know that he's a very grumpy professor who's sort of famous for saying, you know, to a student who did not perform very well in class, here's a dime, it tells you how old the movie is. Here's a dime, call your mother, you'll never make a lawyer. That's not my normal educational technique, but that's essentially what I was saying, is if that's really what you think we do, you've made a terrible mistake, and you should go do something else. Go be a doctor, go be a journalist, go be whatever, but don't do this. So that story to me raises the question of why people come to law school, why we become lawyers. And I confess, I went to law school because I was intellectually bored. I didn't go to law school to do right, truth, and justice. I didn't go to law school to save the unborn. I went to law school because we owned a business, and I was watching the lawyers do stuff that I thought was more interesting than what I did in the business, and thought, this will be fun, this will be interesting. And it proved to be. But what I found is, contrary to what this student at WashU thought, law school actually kindled within me the desire to do right, truth, and justice. It was my professors at the University of Oklahoma, some of whom were very much curmudgeons, many of whom were Catholics, who actually inspired me that the ability to represent people in court, to represent causes in court, was such a gift. It was not to be used lightly. So the second story I want to tell you in my time, and yes, I'm watching my time. The second story I want to tell you is what happened yesterday, because this wasn't part of my prepared remarks, but it was one of the most astonishing days I think I've had as a law professor. Coming from Minneapolis, Minnesota, you can imagine things are a little tense. The burned out buildings, the restaurant 3 blocks from the law school that was burned out, and the proceedings related to George Floyd's death are constantly in the press. In fact, our dean has to alert us every time that there's going to be a hearing because we are uncertain what the reaction to that hearing is going to be and whether we need to hold classes elsewhere. And we were talking in my property class about housing discrimination. And the example from the textbook began with, Mrs. Murphy puts the following ad in a newspaper. Lovely apartment to rent in White Home. Call 657-832. And I was talking with the student, and these are first semester students. These are the babiest of lawyers, okay? And I said to the student, what do you think, what sort of intent do you think is behind that ad? And he said, well, I think she intends to exclude people of color from renting. I said, is there any other interpretation? What do you mean, Professor? I said, well, what if it's 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, right? What if it's a physical description or a historical description? This was the house that was built by Mayor White when the city was developed, and it's the White House. Is that possible? Well, yeah, if that's the historical facts, that is possible. Ah, okay. What about, is it possible that she's just providing potential renters information? What do you mean, Professor? I said, well, have you ever read the autobiography of Malcolm X? Well, yeah, I have. Well, there are people who would not want to live in a white person's home. Is it possible that she has no intention of discrimination, but she wants to let potential renters know? No. I said, really? And what if you go into discovery and you learn that she's actually leased to 3 African-American families, 2 Hispanic families, a Middle Eastern family who's Islamic? Does that change your opinion? Yeah? Good. And then from this side of the room on the very back row, this young man raises his hand very urgently, and I say, yes, Mr. Husitz? And he says, this is ridiculous. You are trying to lawyer around a clear injustice, and this is not what we should be doing in this classroom. And I cannot accept that you are trying to excuse racial discrimination. Now, we're 2 months into the semester. And I would hope that he knows me well enough. And I said, well, I thought you came here to learn how to, quote, lawyer around whatever it is that your client needs lawyering around or your cause needs. We're here to learn how to be lawyers. Well, but we're not here to learn how to be immoral. You know what? I agree with that. But I disagree with you that you should not go through the mental exercise of looking for all the facts surrounding a particular piece of information. And that led us into a dispute that I had with our dean, who is a good and faithful Catholic man, and I am happy and proud to serve under him, which was not true of the prior dean. But I really like my present dean. But when George Floyd happened, he sent an email out to the entire community saying that as he watched the video, he found his legal training kicking in, saying, there's got to be more to this story. And that he was ashamed of that. That it, in fact, in this case, was something that it was so patently unjust that it was wrong for him to have that instinct. And I emailed him and set up an appointment and went in and said, Rob, we're going to have to agree to disagree on this one. Because your role as dean of a law school is to help us teach these students, to form them in such a way that we always look to see if there's additional information that would change our perspective. Think of To Kill a Mockingbird. Think of how many people have been unjustly convicted because the lawyers didn't look for the right evidence. That's the whole premise of the Innocence Project. It is a virtue, particularly in today's environment, to postpone judgment as you look to confirm the facts surrounding it. And what we're seeing, and frankly my biggest fear, is that if the defendant is overcharged in that case, he will have to be acquitted because the jury will be held to beyond a reasonable doubt. So if you're not looking at the other side, if you're not figuring out what's the defense going to be, and I guarantee you, he's got a great lawyer. It's the lawyer that got the last police officer off. Then that DA is going to lose again. And people are going to think it's the justice system instead of overcharging. So where does that leave me, and why am I telling you this story? Because in the encyclical, my students were really uncomfortable with this. And I have a student who's about 40, who's been a Protestant pastor. And he came and he said, but Professor, what worries me is I have this struggle inside of me because I want to be a good lawyer, because I want to go do good things. I want to go do important things that will make it a more just society. But you're making me wonder about what justice really requires. And I thought, yes! But I said, and do you think that's intentional? He said, no. He said, but it's not as simple. And I said, that's exactly right. What I'm trying to teach you is to look at things in a broader perspective, not to deprive you of your moral values. Do you think I have lost any of my moral values when I walk into class and the students are hostile because of my position on traditional marriage and abortion? he said, well, no, you don't seem to have lost your values. And I said, I'm teaching you how to expand your understanding, to deepen your understanding. And here's where I think what the Holy Father says is so important. He's talking about political friendship and political dialogue. And in this year, Lord knows we need it. And what he says is, authentic social dialogue involves the ability to respect the other's point of view and to admit that it may include legitimate convictions and concerns. Based on their identity and experience, others have a contribution to make. And it's desirable that they should articulate those positions for the sake of a more fruitful public debate. When individuals and groups are consistent in their thinking, defend their values and convictions, and develop their arguments, this surely benefits society. Yet this can only occur to the extent that there is genuine dialogue and openness to others. Indeed, quote, in a true spirit of dialogue, we grow in our ability to grasp the significance of what others say and do, even if we can't accept it as our own conviction. In this way, it becomes possible to be frank and open about our beliefs while continuing to discuss, to seek points of contact, and above all, to work and struggle together. That's what we need, to work and struggle together. But in the cancel culture, we don't talk to each other. We silence the other. And we deny their very dignity as a human person by doing so. We deny they have any contribution to make to the common good. So here's where I'm going to come back to lawyers. Toward the end of our dialogue, I said to the students, I said, I know when I walk into my classroom, particularly in Minneapolis, Minnesota, most of you have Googled me. You know that I led, for the Catholic Conference, the marriage amendment fight, which we lost. You know that I'm the head of a Prolife Center, and you know that you disagree with me with a majority of issues. What I would ask is that you trust me enough to respect your views and enter into dialogue with me. And that's what the Holy Father's calling for. And as we head toward our Thanksgiving tables after this Thanksgiving, to the extent you're doing that, if we can hold on to that, if we can see that image of God in that person across the table who holds views that are directly contrary to our own, that may be directly contrary to the church's, but hear them and listen to them and affirm not their view, but their humanity, we will have enriched society. Thank you.